Hello and welcome to my YouTube channel. We have been talking about data privacy and consent management, and now in this video we are going to talk of the key definition of consent management by the top 4 regulations worldwide. So let's first look at the definition of data privacy. Data privacy is my right to choose what personal information do I want to share, with whom am I sharing this information, what is my purpose of sharing this information, what task is that party going to complete for me, and do they need to share my information with anyone else? If yes, then for what purpose? And the concept of taking my permission to collect my data and use it for a purpose and allow others to use it for our purpose is known as consent management. Data privacy ensures that if I find that my data is being misused or is wrongly shared, then there are rules and regulations that protect my interest as well as safeguard me from the misuse of my data. So what is consent management? It's a very simple definition. You obtain, you document and you manage my permissions, my consent for you to be able to collect, process and share my data with anyone else, right? So you collect and process, and if you need to share, you share it with anyone else, but it has to be with my permission. That is what is consent management. What are the top 4 regulations that we have in the world for data privacy? GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation, California Consumer Privacy Act, CCPA, Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, or HIPAA. This is from US, and US does not follow one single regulations for data privacy across because there are different countries, different states within USA. So they follow industry specific guidelines, like for example for healthcare they have HIPAA, which has been in existence and popularity for ages altogether now. And then in our Southeast Asian region, we have a Personal Data Protection Act of Singapore. We do already have Indian PDPA Act, but the rules are yet to be formalized. So we'll wait for that to come up before we start discussing the details of compliances under the Indian Act. So let's first look at the definition of consent management under GDPR. GDPR says consent of the data subject. Now data subject is the user. So the concept of the data subject or user means any freely given, specific, informed, unambiguous indication of his wishes, data subject's wishes, by which he or she, by a statement or a clear affirmative action, signifies agreement to the processing of personal data relating to him or her. In simple languages, a person's personal data, he gives you an affirmative action and a proper statement when he has been properly informed of the specific purpose with a single meaning, unambiguous indication, and he has given that consent freely without being under any pressure, is what is consent, right? In the next slide we'll get into the individual points to make it easier, breakup of the basic definition. So the consent has to be given freely. There should not be any force for getting the consent. It must be very, very specific to the purpose. It must be very well informed. It must be unambiguous. It should have a very clear single definition. In our local things we say double meaning things. No, but in consent management the purpose has to be clear and single meaning purpose, not double meaning purposes. And the user should have the right to revoke it as and when he wants to. Right? So these are the key points that are covered by GDPR. Then we have CCPA, the Californian Consumer Protection Act, Privacy Act. The definition says that you use an opt-out model for data processing, which by Californian law means that any business can process any data until the user opts out and says, I don't want my data to be processed, right? Except for minors less than 16, you need a parental consent if they want to use the data for allow the processing of data for those minors. So key points: you follow an opt-out principle. Businesses can process any personal data until you go and select an opt-out process. So there has to be a way by which people can opt out of it. There could be perhaps a link on the website of the company to say there's a link which says do not sell my personal information. So if you don't want your personal information to be processed or shared, you go and check mark over there, and so your personal information would not be used beyond that level. And if you are less than 13 years, we will take parental consent, but for anything between 13 and 16 years, we will take the consent from the minor itself, and beyond 16, of course, California considers them the adults. So the basic idea is that business can process your data until you go and opt out and say, I don't want you to process my data, right? That is one thing. Second, if you are less than 13 years, then we need your parents' consent, right? And if you are 13 to 16, we'll take your consent. And beyond 16, you are an adult, so you fall into the standard mechanism as otherwise. Limit the use of personal information, personally identifiable information outside statutory allowances, right? So if you are using my information beyond what the government law has allowed, then you have to limit that, right? So that's another thing. PII is the personally identifiable information, and we have one single video talking only of PII, so you can browse through my channel videos and have a look at it. Then we have HIPAA, which is the healthcare protection. So HIPAA says that consent for the use and disclosure of protected health information, PHI, is not required for treatment, payment or healthcare operations. That means that if you are in a hospital or in a healthcare center where your treatment is required, your payment is required, or any other operations have to be conducted, then there is no need to obtain a consent for use of your personal information. However, if it has to be used beyond the healthcare related purpose, then we need your authorization, right? And what could they be? They could be marketing, they could be sharing your personal information with someone. So a general consent is not required for your healthcare purposes. Authorization is required only if the healthcare agency is going to use your information for marketing and sharing. Patients have the right to request restrict use of their information in two cases. One, they do not want to disclose their health information, and second, they don't want any unauthorized person to access their health records. So patient can put in a right to use his right to restrict usage of his information for disclosures and for accessing his health records. And also, in case someone wants to amend his health information, so the patient can put in a right to request a restriction on amending his health records. Only minimum information, if required in extreme cases, can be shared, not full personal health information or full patient information. Then you have the PDPA of Singapore. PDPA requires organizations to obtain an individual's consent before collecting, using or disclosing his personal data, with exceptions provided by law. So an organization can obtain an individual's consent before collecting, using or disclosing his personal data, and there are some exceptions that they are laid by the Singaporean law. So key points here: informed, you need to be informed of the purpose. So any organization who processes your personal information has to keep you well informed. The consent from your side would be voluntarily. They would not be forced to they would not force you to give a consent. If in case there is a possibility of you withdrawing the consent, so before your withdrawal they have to inform you about the consequences of withdrawal, and then of course there is a right to withdraw. And if reasonably necessary, then your consent is assumed. Deemed means it is assumed that you have already given the consent. What are those situations in which your consent is either assumed or consent is not taken or exempted? It's when there are some investigations and some legal proceedings. Then in that case your personal information can be shared with the respective agencies without your consent, or it is assumed or deemed that because there is a reasonable need, so your personal information can be shared without your consent, right? So these were the top currently used regulations around data privacy, and I have tried to summarize them with their consent related information. At some later date, of course, you will see videos about each of them with more information about them on my YouTube channel, so you can keep yourself subscribed. If you like my video, you can press like and bell icon, put your feedbacks in the comment box, and if you think you need some help in applying data privacy rules or laws for your organization, you can contact me. My contact details are available in the description of the YouTube video. Thank you.